I'm Kate Nassab.
And I'm Meredith Denby.
And this is our Poverty Project 1 on how we should define and measure poverty in the United States today.
Our goal for this project is to address the causes and consequences of poverty while respecting the dignity of people, because in the end, people matter. Our goal for this video is not to prove to you all watching that we know the best policy or the best way to solve the issue of poverty in America. We just want to get the people of America involved in this issue and talking about it.
The official poverty measure, or the OPM, is the current system used in the United States to measure poverty. The OPM is an absolute measure that classifies a group as being in poverty if they fall below a specific threshold. A group falls below the poverty line if their gross annual pre-tax income is below the threshold. The threshold is measured by the thrifty food basket times 3, which includes food, clothing, shelter, and utilities. This threshold is based on the assumption that a family spends 1/3 of their money on food annually. Adjustments for family composition and inflation are made to the threshold.
We believe that OPM is an outdated and narrow system for these 5 reasons. The first reason is geographic differences. The current OPM doesn't take into account the geographic differences people experience in poverty, which is mentioned in Kathleen Short's research on the supplemental poverty measure. For example, an impoverished person in New York City spends more money on food, shelter, clothing, and utilities than a person in rural Mississippi, but this factor is not included in the threshold. The next reason is non-traditional cohabitation. There has been an increase in non-traditional cohabitation, which is when 2 or more people live in one space and share resources, but there is no marriage or family connecting them. The resources are being shared, and this does not factor into the threshold.
The next is unknown proximity to the threshold. We don't know how close or far people are from the poverty line, just that they are under it. This is an issue because we don't know the people who are struggling to survive versus those who are just under the poverty line. These people are getting the same accommodations and benefits despite their differing proximities to the poverty line.
The next issue is that the OPM only measures food, clothing, shelter, and utilities. The absolute measure in the OPM only takes into consideration the food, clothing, shelter, and utilities. Quality of life and standard of living are left out of this equation. It leads us to ask the question, but what about the expenses on everything else?
The OPM does not account for benefits and expenses in the measurement, 2 variables that can elevate a group out of poverty or push them in deeper. Families who receive in-kind and near-cash benefits are able to save money through these benefits and use the saved money to improve their lives in other ways. Non-discretionary work-related expenses, such as childcare costs, can push a family further below the threshold. These benefits and expenses have too much power over a group's relation to poverty to not account for.
The last reason the OPM is an outdated and narrow system is that the standard is based on survival. The standard is based on survival, but we believe this is too low. Survival is not enough, but how much is enough for a household to be doing okay? We believe everyone should be insured more than just survival. However, to reach a point of social inclusion, they should be provided opportunities to get to this point.
Part 3 is our plan for defining and measuring poverty in the United States. We have defined poverty as the combination of income and central capability deficiencies.
In order to identify the groups in poverty, we first use the capability measurement. This measurement is the combination of both the internal capabilities a person has and their external environment. If there is a deficit in either or both, then they are more prone to living a life in poverty.
In addition to looking at a group's combined capabilities, we included income in the measurement. Income matters because money is necessary in obtaining resources like food, clothing, shelter, and utilities. Income matters because without it, we lack necessary access to crucial resources we need for survival. As Nussbaum presented in her argument, income is a means to an end, and capabilities are the end. Money is necessary in ensuring our combined capabilities. While the average person would define poverty as income inadequacy, we feel that low income alone does not classify a group as being impoverished. We care about the overlapping area of income and combined capability inadequacies because it enables us to look at 2 problems that we think inhibit people from living a life of dignity, well-being, and social inclusion.
We believe that income inadequacy and capability failure is a two-way street. For example, a family with a low income has insufficient economic resources in order to have central capabilities, and people without central capabilities have a hard time creating a sufficient income. It turns into a vicious cycle that makes poverty easy to fall into and almost impossible to get out of. Capabilities are an individual's ability to do things, and functionings are the things they do with their capabilities. Functionings are a subset of capabilities and impossible to achieve without them. Without the central capabilities, whether that be internal like the ability to read, or external factors like access to school buses, it's almost impossible to achieve basic functionings.
Poverty should be measured through a modified absolute system that incorporates the effects of external environments and capabilities. Our modified system takes into consideration the 5 issues we previously discussed. These issues include the OPM's failure to consider geographical differences, non-traditional cohabitation, proximity to the poverty threshold, the fact that it only measures food, clothing, shelter, and utilities, and how it's based on a standard of survival.
Some people would argue our point that trying to measure capabilities is too difficult to measure because it's subjective, or that every person has different capabilities, so there is no absolute measure of it. But we believe capabilities can be measured by looking at both internal capabilities and comparing it to external environments. For example, we can measure the internal capability to read by looking at the literacy rate at a low-income high school, which gives us insight on the external environment. If the literacy rates are low, then we can assume it has something to do with the external environment. To the people who argue measuring internal capabilities is too difficult, we say that you can infer the internal from measuring external capabilities, which is easier to accomplish. Finally, in Part 4, we will discuss why it is we care about all the issues addressed previously. The simple answer to us is that people matter. The dignity of human beings is the most important aspect to remember when addressing poverty. Sometimes, addressing poverty takes dignity away from people. We want to respect what people want to do, but at the same time, helping often hurts, and a person's well-being often clashes with their own personal choices. Caring about people means balancing well-being and individual dignity.